Hey everyone, well, we are getting very close to Halloween. Hope you're enjoying the spooky season. Hope you have a lot of fun plans for the holiday. But in the meantime, it's the Zane Master, or is it Uncle Brian? Either way, we are going back to a year in which this guy was a pretty prominent figure, back to the year 1993 for Halloween Havoc 93, October 24th at the Lakefront Arena in historic New Orleans. They keep calling it that. I wonder why that was the only adjective they used to describe New Orleans. And all the hype and all the promotion for it, all the control center things, it was always historic New Orleans. There are other historic cities in this country. You could say historic New York City, historic Boston, historic Chicago, historic Colonial Williamsburg. New Orleans, there's a lot of other adjectives you could use to describe. This show was nominated by Alex Fireheart over at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. And among other things, this show is known for the return of Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal. Now, you saw me cover Halloween Havoc 92 a while ago, which was the debut of that concept. The coal miner's glove match with Sting and Jacob the Snake-Up Roberts. That was a dumpster fire. Things are going to be a bit different in the year 1993, but there's also a lot of other cool stuff that you will see on this show. Like, for instance, the opening mini-movie to kick off the show. It's of these kids that are going trick-or-treating at night, and before they go home to watch Halloween Havoc, they want to go to the spookiest house on the block. They ring the doorbell, it makes a screaming noise, and the door slowly opens to reveal Tony Schiavone, who does a tremendous job acting in this skit here. I mean, plays along with the other mini-movies we've seen in WCW's history around this time. Feels like more of the same, of that kind of very high production quality, kind of contrasting what you normally see on WCW television. But Schiavone's acting here is pretty brilliant.
Hey, shouldn't you be at the pay-per-view?
I have a helicopter waiting to pick me up in a few minutes.
Tony has the power of teleportation, talking about the evils of spin the wheel, make the deal. I love that he gets right in the little kid Dracula's face. It's actually his son, Matt, in real life. I love how the kid pokes him in the nose, and I love Tony's face in response to that. Do you want to see something really scary? Ooh, Tony Schiavone's actually the Man-Bat. And that, kids, is why you don't go into a stranger's house on Halloween. 6,000 folks in attendance on this night, 100,000 pay-per-view buys, giving it a 0.5 buy rate. This is kind of the doldrums in terms of numbers for WCW, still kind of recovering from the previous regimes. Eric Bischoff opens up dressed as a Confederate soldier. Why are there so many people in wrestling who have done this? Tony Schiavone is dressed as Jesse Ventura, and Ventura is New Orleans' #1 gynecologist. I've been laughing my ass off in the first 5 minutes of this show. Six-man tag to open the show as Harlem Heat and the Equalizer take on Ice Train, Charlie Norris, don't call him Chuck, and the Shockmaster. They had begun a bit of a rehabilitation process for old Fred Ottman after the infamous crashing through the wall that we saw in my Clash 24 review. A series of interviews that kind of rebranded him as this goofy construction worker, Uncle Fred. These interview segments of Tony Schiavone talking to him and just trying to get more of a feel of what he's like. And he's this big, lovable oaf kind of guy. And in fact, one of the scenes where he's interviewing Uncle Fred, you can see a young Cody Rhodes harassing him. Something else I thought about watching this match was Ice Train being there this early on in WCW, realizing he's pretty much there until the very end of WCW's time in 01. Like, he was like, one of the last things he did was a couple of weeks before Greed, when like Canyon took a forklift and flipped his car over or something like that. He was still very actively involved in the company all the way to the end. And for that guy to be there for so long, and they did so little with him overall, I was pretty shocked. Also, I hadn't realized that Booker T and Stevie Ray were still referred to as Cole and Ken at this point, but to avoid confusion, I'm just going to call them Booker T and Stevie Ray. Booker can't seem to move Ice Train in the early going. In comes Stevie Ray, and soon after that, in comes Norris, then Shockey. Lots of back and forth. The baddies and the good guys each get turns double teaming. Equalizer lays out Norris with a big clothesline, really his one impressive thing all match. I like Booker T's early version of the axe kick with a little spin beforehand. He goes for a second rope splash, but he misses. The hot tag to Shockmaster, who lays out everyone, catching Booker with a bear hug slam of some kind, pins and wins. But after the bell, Shockmaster and Equalizer continue to brawl. I'll give it 1 star out of 5. It is a short and sweet match, but it is the weakest by far on this show. There's a lot of great action on this card. This opening 6-man, not exactly. Story about Charlie Norris, though. Soon after this, he was not long for WCW. He would leave the company, then later sue it on grounds of racism racial discrimination. He felt very uncomfortable being what he felt compelled to, portray this stereotypical Native American character he didn't feel very happy about. I think Greg Gagne was an agent at the time, and he was also part of that lawsuit. It was eventually settled out of court, and I just realized in doing my research that Norris sadly passed away earlier this year in 2023. Backstage, Eric Bischoff interviews Terry Taylor, who's making his second return to WCW at this point. He is the man chosen by the board of directors to be the second referee for the Ric Flair-Rick Rude match. Terry says he's doing this because he knows he's done some bad things in his career, so he sees it as a chance to do something good for a change. I might make a controversial call. I might not. Who knows? He calls Eric General Custer to close things out. Up next, Paul Orndorff with the Assassin for some reason, taking on Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Orndorff is filling in for relative newcomer Yoshi Kwan, who got injured shortly before the show. Like I mentioned, there is no established reason as to why the Assassin is suddenly with Paul Orndorff, who, remember, earlier this year debuted the Equalizer as his heavy, and since then I have not seen the two on camera together at all. But you know what, maybe the Assassin just wanted to keep a closer eye on his son Nick Patrick, the referee. The Paula chants are alive and well when Orndorff graces the ring. Forearms and chops aplenty at the start. The fight moved to the outside. Orndorff gains an advantage. Steamboat on the ramp for a while. He goes charging at Paul, but Orndorff just moves out of the way. Steamboat comes back. Ooh, I will always pop for a good do-si-do. Ricky getting a little chippy on the outside with Paul's arm as Nick Patrick scolding his dad, telling him to stay in his corner. Orndorff just getting beat pillar to post by the Dragon for several minutes, even some joint manipulation. Damn, is Ricky working heel tonight? Paul powders once again to the outside. This thing feels so one-sided, it's almost like one person put down their controller. Finally, Patrick intervenes, and that allows Mr. Wonderful to come back with a vengeance. Both guys go for a cross body, they collide in midair, and they're down. Paul going for a dirty pin, but the referee catches it and repeatedly kicking Orndorff's feet off the ropes. Steamboat with the big chop off the top and onto the ramp. Back in the ring, the two trading some good pinfall attempts and counters. The big cross body, but the referee is distracted by the Assassin. On the outside, Assassin slipping what looks to be a case from a pair of earbuds into his mask and headbutts Steamboat in the back of the head, which for those of you wondering would also hurt the Assassin who's giving the move. If you put an egg in a football helmet, the egg's still gonna break. Anyway, that causes Ricky to be counted out. Orndorff wins the day. I give it 3 stars out of 5. I see other people reviewing this show and they all really highly praise this matchup, and I just don't see it. Like, I can respect it. I think that they do a pretty good job with the action, but I think there's a lot of start and stop with there that for me kind of took me out of it. And then of course, I thought the finish was a bit disappointing as well. And unfortunately, that will not be the last time I say that about this show. Well, as I've mentioned in a few videos about WCW during this time period, their relationship with the NWA is kaput, and now that leaves a big logic hole when it comes to the big gold belt. Now they have 2 world championships. There is the WCW championship that was made after Ric Flair left, and then there was the big gold belt that Flair took with him when he went to the World Wrestling Federation. But now he's back, the belt's back, it's been the NWA title, now it's not anymore. So for the last several weeks after Rick Rude beat Ric Flair for the belt at Fall Brawl, it has not been a recognized world championship. It's just a belt. It has no significance to it at this point besides that. But then in the middle of this show, they announce and they report that, oh, the International Board of Directors has now claimed that the belt is a world championship again. So in case you're keeping score at home, folks, there's once again a world title that will be defended between Rude and Flair. Up next, World TV Championship as Lord Stevie Reegs defends against the British Bulldog. Last time we saw Davey Boy on this channel, he was challenging Vader for the championship at Clash 24. Regal won the TV Championship from Ricky Steamboat the previous month at Fall Brawl with some help from Sir William's Umbrella. Regal referring to Davey Boy as a commoner in the build for this, has nothing in common with his lordship. Regal doesn't even want to lock up at first. He has such disdain for his opponent tonight. Look at the athleticism of Davey Boy early on. Regal counters with a cartwheel of his own, but Bulldog catches him. A lovely sequence with Regal's snapmares and Bulldog's arm wrenches. Nice surfboard hold on the champ. A distraction by Sir Willie allows Regal to regain the advantage. Tony pointing out that's the 3rd match in a row something like that's happened, which I don't know if I would have mentioned out loud. Steve with the Regal roll continues to work over the challenger with a series of holds as the ring announcer says 10 minutes have elapsed. Regal keeps applying the pressure, but Bulldog pulls out a very cool roll-up and a kick out to start coming back. With less than a minute to go, Bulldog hits the running power slam, but there is a time miscommunication. This was supposed to be the finish, but there's still time on the clock, so Regal has to kick out. So that's kind of shocking. Bulldog with a pile driver with seconds to go. The time elapses just before the 3 count, and the match is ruled a draw, meaning Regal holds on once again. I give it 3.5 stars. I really like this match a lot. I always like it when the British Bulldog hits that switch and just turns on that European style you don't get to see him do much of against other American wrestlers, for instance. So the fact that these two had that background and were able to make it look so good was just really satisfying to watch. But again, this finish was a bit disappointing because of the miscommunication. The power slam, would have been more impactful. It didn't take too much away from this matchup, but you can tell that was probably meant to be the finish. WCW champion Vader on stage with Harley Race, and he spins the wheel so he can make the deal. The wheel lands on the Texas death match, so we'll see that in the main event. So my question is, the night before this on Saturday night, there was this whole recurring bit where fans were getting to spin the wheel, and then the show ended with Cactus spinning the wheel, and it ends on him going bang, bang, slow motion, and it goes to be continued. So you're supposed to think, the wheel, you'll find out what Cactus spun when the show happens, but we don't get that. So what was the point of Cactus even spinning it if it's Vader's choice? In a match for the U.S. Championship, the natural Dustin Rhodes defends against Stunning Steve. Austin's name, Keith says he's accompanied by Colonel Rob Parker. Not the case, but they are planting the seeds for the breakup of the Hollywood Blondes at this point. As I mentioned in Clash 24, Pillman was injured, which caused the Blondes to drop the tag team championships. Bryan is back from injury now, but we do see Steve being courted, it seems, by Colonel Parker for a singles run. Parker says he got Austin a match for the U.S. Championship, and Pillman seems concerned about this development. The match begins with the two sizing each other up for a while. Austin hits an elbow, and the intensity begins to increase. Nice dropkick by Dustin. Austin runs into the corner with a flying knee attempt, but Dustin moves, and Steve takes a tumble, seems to hurt his leg, and Dustin looks to exploit it. Austin gets the ref between them, and he takes Dustin to Dick Kick City. He drops the knee pad of the good leg and dropping it on the champ. I love this move here where Dustin pulls Austin into the corner, who comes back with a big knee drop. Nice. Dustin going for a bulldog, but Austin carries it into the turnbuckle crotch first. Austin gets his feet on the ropes during a cover. Patrick counts the 3 but waves it off. Steve thinks he's won the match and is looking for the belt, but the match is still going on. Dustin rolling him up to win. Stunning Steve pops up and decks Rhodes with the title belt and busts him open. 3 stars out of 5 for me. I thought the action in this match was solid. There were some moves and counters I'd never seen before, and it's so cool to see Steve Austin here in his younger days, being so quick and active compared to how he would be when he was a bigger star. But I thought their match at Halloween Havoc 91 for the TV championship was a better match than this one, all told, even though that one had a time limit draw, which is kind of the fate of so many matches of that division. Well, the previous night on Saturday night, Marcus Alexander Bagwell and Too Cold Scorpio won the tag team titles from the Nasty Boys in dramatic fashion, and now it's time for the rematch here on pay-per-view. Bagwell and Scorpio accompanied by Teddy Long, and the Nasty Boys with Missy Hyatt, who's giving me Stacy Keibler, Duchess of Dudleyville vibes in a big way here. They say she's been billed as the Nasty Boys escort, and Jesse Ventura says, she fits right in with that job. Whoa!
What a better job for Missy than to be part of an escort service.
Before the bell, Missy gets a smooch from Bagwell. He ducks a double boot and hits a kangaroo kick. There are copious amounts of whoop, there it is chants as this match goes on, which, makes sense because it's a tag team match, but this is just the hip chant of the time period because the song is big. They have it going the whole night, regardless if it's a tag match. We heard it in the previous match. We're going to hear it again in Flair vs. Rude. Scorpio launching off Marcus's Backwell and dives onto the challengers on the outside. Scorpio working the arm of Sags. He almost slips off the second turnbuckle, but still gets the dive off. The Nasties take over. They dump Bagwell over the top rope in quite a tumble. Missy gives Bagwell a big ol' slap for the kiss earlier. Marcus laid out on the outside. He gets worked on for several minutes, even spat on by Sags. Jerry just lays out Marcus with a big ol' clothesline. Bagwell comes back, thinks he's tagged in his partner, but the ref didn't see it. Great resilience by Marcus, finally getting the official tag. Scorpio running wild here. Missy gets up on the apron, so does Teddy. They're scrapping, then Long gets knocked off. Bagwell with a meeting of the minds. The 450 by Scorp, but Sags decks Scorpio with his boot, and Knobs makes the cover to win. The Nasty Boys regain the tag titles. 3.5 stars out of 5 for me. It's another fun matchup here with more chaos at the end. I really admire Bagwell's selling as he's like just getting the hell beat out of him throughout this whole match. Scorpio's athleticism is always fun to watch, and the Nasty Boys, depending on who they work with, can have some amazing matches. They're brawlers, but they are kind of chameleons in that way, where they can have a good match with this young upstart team. And even though Bagwell and Scorpio, we find out like later on in years that they actually didn't like working with each other, they kind of hated each other, I think they have good chemistry here. We get some pre-match comments from Sid Vicious, then he goes on to face Sting in what's being billed a franchise match. Of course, Sting is referred to as the franchise of WCW at this point. It's a mantle he would carry until the end of the company's run, in fact. But now Sid Vicious says that he wants to be the franchise, so basically they're fighting for that, that title. I think it's funny that so many of Sid's biggest storylines in WCW are like, hey, that wrestler has that thing, I want that thing too, because I'm just reminded of like Goldberg's streak, I have a streak too. Check out the denim sequin combo on Sting here. Oh my, we have a very intense fan of the front row, by the way. Action starts out fast and furious. Sting with many clotheslines. Sid powders and they make their way to the crowd for a bit. Sting with a top rope clothesline, but Parker with the distraction. Sid answers with a choke slam. Sting gets pummeled for a bit. The Colonel getting his licks in on more than one occasion. Sid with a chair on the outside, slamming it into Sting's back. Sid wearing down Sting in the ring. We get some Sid chants from the audience here. The announcers try to play off as Sting chants. Sting fights out of the bear hug and goes on a big run, hits 2 Stinger splashes, hits the Colonel, then Parker's just grabbing at everyone's legs. Like, it's very obvious he knows what he's looking at, but the story is he's supposed to accidentally grab Sid's leg. So Sid is distracted. That allows for a roll-up victory for the Stinger. Whoop, there it is, says the fans. I give it 3 stars out of 5. I love the action in this matchup here. I think that it's a huge improvement from their match they had at Halloween Havoc 90 when it was Sting defending the title against Sid. Match was much better here, but again, the finish and the way that it just took me out of it with Parker just kind of like grabbing at all the legs, pretending he didn't know he was grabbing Sid's. That took me out of it at the worst possible time. Backstage, Vader and Cactus Jack prepare for their Texas death match. Jack in a chilling clip just screaming to himself, "You can't kill Cactus Jack." On we go now to a match that was for the world title, then for just a belt, and now it's a world title again as Rick Rude defends against Ric Flair. Like I mentioned back at Fall Brawl, Rude beat Flair for the belt. They were making a big deal about this rematch at Fall Brawl, and all the control centers, Chris Cruz was saying it's unprecedented for the rematch to happen on the very next pay-per-view, and I guess I'll take their word for it. I don't know why they made such a big deal about that, but yeah, then it was the whole thing where it's just for the belt, and now it's actually for a world championship, I guess. Look at Rick Rude's tights over here. Flair with a black eye on one leg, Fifi the Maid on the other. That's heat. Oh yes, by the way, Terry Taylor is the second referee in this match, just to remind you. Flair gets pyro when his name is called, and Jesse just goes, all that for the challenger? Flair on top early on, goes to the figure 4 within a couple of minutes here. There's the whoop, there it is chance. Flair continues to stay on top. They both tumble to the outside. Rude with a hard landing. As they fight on the outside, Jesse goes, what a load Terry Taylor is. Flair with a flying attack off the top. That connects. Goes for another dive, but he pays for it. The Rooster stops the Rudester from using a chair. Rude with another top rope bop to Flair. Sits on his back for a long time with the camel clutch. He's got a big old booger hanging out of his nose. Flair goes up and over in the corner and decks the cameraman in the process. Another top rope bop. A top bop. Gets Flair in a bear hug. Tries to pin him that way. A flying nothing fails to connect. Flair hitting his own Rude Awakening. Flair goes up top again, goes for his own flying nothing, and takes a boot. We get a referee bump. Terry Taylor taking his sweet time getting to the ring, and he immediately gets decked. Rude grabs the foreign object he used to win the belt last month, but Flair catches him. A photographer at ringside grabs the foreign object, even though Flair's supposed to use it. Bring that back, cameraman, you're not part of the work. He grabs it, he decks Rude, goes to the cover, Terry goes to the count, but just before the 3, other referee Randy Anderson chimes in and says that he saw Flair cheat, so the match ends in a DQ. Weak! Flair takes the belt, so Rude takes Fifi for a minute before they scuffle and eventually split. I'm going to give this one 3.5 stars. I love the psychology that these two had. I think, babyface Ric Flair, it's a rare sighting, but man, he's on a whole different level from heel Ric Flair. The stuff that he does and pulls out is very interesting. It's just not your typical Ric Flair match, which I appreciate. But again, we get another lousy, inconclusive finish. Then it's time for the main event. The wheel is spun and the deal will be done in a Texas death match as Vader takes on Cactus Jack. This is a non-title match, by the way. Back in April, Vader put Jack out of action with a powerbomb on the concrete. It was believed that Jack had lost his memory and wound up somewhere lost in Cleveland. We got those infamous segments where he thought he was a sea captain. Then at Clash 24, Jack returned at the end of the show, apparently having made the whole thing up, but he is out for revenge. So according to their rules, the Texas death match is very much last man standing. It's you have to pin the guy, and then after you pin them, they have to get up by the 10 count or they lose. But there's also a 30-second rest period between the pinfall and then when the 10 count begins. So it's a bit confusing, and there is a lot of starting and stopping in this thing. They're brawling from the get-go. Jack grabs a steel chair and dinks Vader with it with a straight shot to the dome. Vader shrugs it off, gets to work pounding away on Jack. Big punches in the corner. Jack starts to bleed. Jack suplexing Vader over the ropes and onto the ramp. Race gets involved, but he pays for it. Another chair shot, but at least Vader gets his hand up for it as they make their way to the graveyard set. They fall into an open grave on the set. By the way, I love the tombstone that just reads dead. Also gotta love Elvis Lives. I know Mr. Ooh La La likes that. Jack gets the first pinfall and we get a rest period. Cactus with the cactus! He dives off the ramp with the cactus elbow, gets another pinfall, but Vader once again gets up before 10. More corner punches, sends blood onto Tony and Jesse at ringside. Yuck. That does kind of remind me of a story that happened to me many years ago. I was working camera at a show in Portland one time, and these two wrestlers were fighting. They were both bleeding, and they were fighting right in front of me on the outside, and one of them flicked their head back, and the blood got on my glasses and on my hands and the camera lens, and it was just that was so fun. A table is set up in the corner, Vader doing a big flop onto it. Cactus does a sunset flip off the apron, dodging the big sit. Jack tries to launch himself over the barricade into Vader, but just bounces off him. Harley Race pulls out a taser. Hey, no peeking though. Vader hits the moonsault. We get a 3 count, the rest period, but Jack gets up. Back on the ramp, Jack is on Vader's back like a backpack. Vader just doing a snap bump onto him. Oh God, that looks so painful. Vader follows up with a chair shot of his own. Vader shooing the medical team away and gets his own pinfall. They keep fighting despite the rest period. Harley gently nudging the taser into Jack's leg, and he goes down, so he cannot answer the 10 count. Boy, that looks clunky as hell. Vader is declared the winner. Jack gets up, hits the double arm DDT onto Harley on the ramp, but Harley barely sells it as he leaves, and Jack ends the show standing tall. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. This match was, as the kids say today, a banger. I mean, it was so brutal, you couldn't look away from it. It's kind of shocking that WCW would have a match like this in their main event, even on pay-per-view. How often do you see matches during this time period get, in America at least, get this bloody and get this violent and physical? It was pretty crazy to watch. Both men looked like absolute badasses in this thing, and it was a huge improvement from last year's Spin the Wheel, Make the Deal with Roberts and with Sting. It is sad to read what Foley had to say about this match, and hearing he was in such a dark place mentally and hated WCW so much at this point, he tried to get himself legitimately injured in this match to the point he'd be taken out of wrestling and collect his Lloyd's of London insurance policy. That's kind of messed up, and that obviously didn't happen here. He would stay wrestling and working for WCW until the following year. In fact, this would not be the last time these two fought. They would fight again, the following year in another Texas death match on television. They would fight in Munich, Germany, and when Cactus would lose his ear in the process. And finally, Jack would quit WCW in '94 due to frustrations with creative. Can you blame him? My grade for WCW Halloween Havoc is a B-. It was kind of a tough grade for me here. I'm going to get, it's kind of a weighted B-. I didn't want to put it in the C's, but just barely. And the reason I would have is because there are so many matches here with just badly executed or badly thought out finishes in 90% of the matches on this show. Besides that, there wasn't really a lot of bad stuff. Like the action itself, everything before the finishes for most of these matches was really good. And again, that main event was just an all-timer in terms of brutality and physicality. But the fact they had so many little missteps along the way there did kind of take me out of it. Because even when they're at their best, they're still shooting themselves in the foot, because they are still kind of in that post Bill Watts period that kind of like decimated a lot of the goodwill that WCW had that time, and it would take a while for them to build it back up. And it's just, you know, there's a lot of growing pains at this point. We are still in that period where we still have those stars who aren't quite on their way out yet, but the writing's on the wall, like Austin, like Foley, like Pillman, and it's just very fascinating to watch this time period. As someone who's been watching a lot of '93 this year, just by the virtue of like what I've been reviewing, it's been very interesting to see how WCW has ebbed and flowed as the years gone on. But what did you think of Havoc '93, and what did you think of this review of it? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to Wrestling with Regret. Well, in a couple weeks, we are back here on the Classic Review, and it's going to be November, and of course, the mind goes to Survivor Series around this time. Let's talk about 1996. The Bret Hart-Steve Austin rivalry really heating up, and of course, we see the debut of a certain young blue chipper, some Rocky Melvin guy, I don't know. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.